The first weekend of the transfer portal window is behind us, and the Auburn Tigers, they're winners.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Joining us as he does every single Monday, it is the Lindsay, Crosby of AuburnDaily.com and a bunch of other places as well. The Auburn Tigers are winners this weekend. They've got a new defensive lineman coming into this roster. They may have more defensive linemen coming in soon. And it appears that the staff hasn't fully closed the door on a quarterback. Lindsay, let's start off with the big news this weekend, and that is defensive tackle Philip Blidi, the former Indiana and former Texas Tech defensive lineman, is now an Auburn Tiger. You go through the first full weekend of the transfer portal window. You add a guy who I think will be a starter. I think he will start in the 3 technique for the Tigers this season. And you don't lose any starters or guys that are in the 2 deep leaving spring. That is a win in every single way, if you ask me.
Yeah, I like the addition of Philip Blidi, and we touched on this a bit last week, but this is a grown man making a business decision. This is something, he has a wife and 2 kids. He has bigger concerns than just, where am I going to play football? He's looking for a good place where obviously his kids will be welcome, his family's taken care of. So this should give you some comfort that the reputation Auburn has just from the outside is really good. And then obviously Auburn's able to be competitive for the players that they want. But getting a guy that's got as much experience as he does, this is one of those things where it gives you needed a body, but more than that, you needed a guy who could come in and provide a really stable floor. And if nothing else, and I think it could be more, but if nothing else, Philip Blidi means coming to Auburn, joining this defensive line room, means that you have a better room that is going to be better prepared to handle the offenses you see in the SEC week in and week out, because you have a guy who's done it for multiple seasons with Power 5 programs against a variety of offenses.
Yeah, one of the things that I think Auburn needed to address this window was, okay, you need 2 defensive linemen that are starting caliber. They may not have to necessarily win the starting job, but guys where if they had to start, you wouldn't feel like you were really missing out on a whole lot. Philip Blidi is one of those guys for me. And look, if Gage Key starts and it's Philip Blidi rotating in, that's fine. That is 100% A-okay with me. And so now they need to go out and either get another defensive end that you feel good if something happens to Keldrick Falk, or maybe it allows you to kind of do some more position flexing if you want to move Keldrick to Buck, if you feel like it's a better job for you to get, an end. And there's different things they could do with personnel there, but whether it's another defensive end, whether it's another nose tackle, you just have the feeling that Auburn is going to be able to do more of that. So Philip Blidi coming in, to me, there's an obvious position battle between him and Gage Keys. There's no question about that. Gage Keys emerged as the starter at that 3 technique about halfway through spring, and he looked fine, looked solid. Looked like a key part of the defensive line at A-Day. But there was a guy who I think is important for the future of Auburn football rotating in behind him. Of course, that is Malik Blockton, the true freshman Malik Blockton, friend of the program. You got to think the addition of Blidi probably impacts Malik Blockton the most, because regardless of if Gage Keys or Blidi wins the job, it's going to be less potential snaps for Malik Blockton.
Yeah, whoever wins the job, the other guy is the default backup there, right? And so you do have that issue. At the same time, I think the counterpoint to this is, from a short-term, immediate playing time, yes, you do have that issue. But what it gives Malik Blockton is the opportunity to sit behind some veterans who obviously have played plenty of college football, know what they're doing. It gives the staff an opportunity, rather than having to run him out there 30 snaps a game, 35, whatever it may be, gives them the opportunity to find specific moments to utilize his skill set the best. And so he may get less the overall snaps with with Philip Blidi on campus, but I think he could be more effective in the snaps that he does get because he doesn't have to conserve energy to be a heavy rotational piece.
Yeah.
And you do have that situation of if a guy goes down, now you have much more faith in that third player at the position than you had before when it was Keys and Blockton and then someone as your number 3. You have a lot more confidence there. So for the team as a whole, obviously better. It can be better for Blockton, but immediate short term, less snaps, less opportunity to produce in year 1 right away.
Yeah, and I think Blockton is a mature player for his age. I think he's going to kind of see this and say, okay, there's ways I can benefit from this. As far as Auburn just really winning the weekend, I mean, this is the guy where I talked to a few folks just throughout the SEC asking what they were hearing about Philip Blidi, specifically on the LSU side of things. LSU felt really confident that they were going to land this guy because the sales pitch at LSU is similar to what it is at Auburn, where it's like, we need help on the defensive line. I think LSU's defensive line is worse off than Auburn's is. And I don't even know if Auburn's is that bad off now at this point, especially with some of the guys that could be coming in. We'll talk about them in a second. But the fact that Hugh Freeze and this Auburn staff were able to say, hey, this is a better situation for you, for your family, from a football standpoint, from a life standpoint, over LSU, who's a program that's been trending up. I mean, they were playing, that they won the SEC West 2 years ago, had a Heisman winner last year. Auburn went toe-to-toe with them and said, hey, we are a better situation for you. And that's going to be lost in all of this, Lindsay, but it's very, very important.
Yeah, it's a big takeaway, and a point that I tried to make in a little bit different format at the very beginning there, but in a lot of different respects, Auburn's able to point to different things and say, hey, this is a good place for you to come. This is like, whether it's from the family perspective, whether it's the playing time perspective, we have to assume that NIL was in the same ballpark. Well, obviously, we don't know what these NIL deals were, but we have to assume, that Auburn was competitive with everybody else in that situation. So there's a lot of things you can take away where you can say, hey, Auburn's at the point now I'm going to call it a rebuild because the last guy left it in a terrible place.
Yeah.
I'm going to, the potato famine here was real. That you're in a position where you can now say, if there's a piece that we need, we're going to go out and get them. That's the confidence you can have as an Auburn fan. You can say, hey, if there's, we identified defensive line's an issue. Bam, we got one already. We're excited about some more potentially coming. And you're a player in all of these commitments. And I think in the new world of college football, that's all you can really ask for, is to be a consistent player in all of these commitments. And Auburn is. So you should feel good about it if you're an Auburn fan.
100% agree. 100% agree. So Auburn wins the weekend. Philip Blidi is a big reason why, but that's not all. Seems like more defensive linemen are coming to help bolster this front seven. We discuss that next right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. And Lindsay, hopefully a lot of our everydayers know that LinkedIn is the best way to find qualified candidates for your job for free. It's almost like with all these positive news we're hearing about the defensive line, it's almost like Hugh Freeze teamed up with Von Trell and said, hey, let's make a job listing for some defensive linemen. And it's like, man, all these qualified candidates come out of the woodwork saying, you know what? I'd love to be here for this. LinkedIn, it's not that much different. It's not that much different. LinkedIn, it's not just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else. Think of it as your own transfer portal. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, they may not have the time and resources to do so. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Lindsay Crosby of Auburn Daily hanging out with us. More defensive linemen, I believe, are on the way, as well as several local and national media members. So let's start with Isaiah Rakes, who started his career at Texas A&M, most recently at USC. Maybe the third team will be the charm, but this is a guy who is a very, very good defensive lineman. And you're starting to see some predictions and some smoke say, hey, Rakes could end up being an Auburn Tiger. It's a position of need. They need depth at defensive tackle. At his size and frame, you got to think he's a potential nose. And to me, you got to think they're making a similar sales pitch here. So Isaiah Rakes could be a huge addition to this defensive line.
And when you look at his situation here, plays for a full season at Texas A&M, doesn't get into any games at USC. So gets a red shirt there, has a couple years of eligibility. He's not a one and done kind of guy. Assuming he doesn't go to the league early, which obviously these guys can do. It's a little bit different calculus now in the age of NIL, but it gives you a big body that can set in the middle of your defense potentially for multiple years. And you look at some of the again, all we have is 2022 production numbers, but you look and you see how he got significantly better and got more shares of playing time as the season went on. His PFF grades get better and better and better throughout the season. So a guy that was definitely acclimating to college football and then started to make his presence felt once he got there, once he got comfortable, and now has had a full year to work on physical conditioning, weight room, all that kind of stuff before hopefully coming to Auburn. You like the idea. If you can add these two guys, two big bodies in the middle of your interior offensive line, or defensive line, one of them is one and done. One of them could have multiple years of eligibility. Sets you up really well with who you've recruited as high school freshmen to fill in and give you a dominant defensive line relatively quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is the guy. I mean, he enrolled at USC or committed to USC on January 9th of this year. So I mean, he was only there for spring, which is a little odd, a little unique. And I've already seen some Auburn people say that they don't like that, but I mean, I don't know. You just don't turn this guy down. It kind of makes you wonder, like, are they, saying things that they can't actually cash at USC? Like, I don't know. There's a lot of ways you could speculate and kind of read between the lines there. That's not really what I want to do. But as far as Isaiah Rakes being interested in Auburn, it seems like that smoke is real. And so that would obviously be a huge addition if that were to happen. And then on the other side of it, and this is the player that I'm probably most excited about in the portal, and I just couldn't quit talking about him on Friday's show, but Kieron Crawford, the edge player, he played Buck if he were to choose Auburn. I mean, Arkansas State, I don't know if I said the school he was from, but Kieron Crawford, he's, I think he's spectacular, Lindsay. This is a guy who didn't start playing football until his senior year of high school, and he's just gotten better and better and better in a short amount of time. There's been some traction from national folks that think he is going to Auburn, but you got to think like other schools are going to be able to potentially offer him a starting spot. Auburn's not going to be able to do that this season just because of Jalen McLeod, but the impact that he could have on this roster could be massive. It seems like there's a lot of things pointing the direction for the Auburn Tigers for Kieron Crawford.
Yeah, super athletic dude. He was a basketball player before he switched to football. And so 6'4", 245 or so is kind of what he's listed at. And it's really one of those, he's done what he's done so far off of just pretty much sheer athleticism. And you get him with a really good supporting cast. You get him with a good coach that can develop him, which we obviously believe we have that. It's part of the reason when you lost your defensive line coach, you promoted the guy behind him was because he was such an up-and-coming rising star. You wanted him to stick around. And so it feels like another situation. He'd have 2 more years of eligibility. So even if he spent this season as a rotational piece, you'd still have 1 more year of him being able to come out, dominate, and flash before he goes to the NFL. Because a dude this athletic and this talented, but still raw, that's a profile the NFL will draft and say, we can build this guy and develop this guy into a top defensive lineman. So,
well, Daryl and I made that joke on Friday, Lindsay. We were like, okay, this is a guy who hadn't played football. He didn't start playing football until senior year of high school. went to a group of 5 school and excelled, then, took the step forward to the SEC. And it's like, that sounds like somebody who gets drafted in like Friday night of the NFL draft. Like, that's just, you hear that story over and over and over again. So I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. And why not? Like, why not Auburn, right? I understand the argument is playtime. I think there's a case to be made about, here's how we can showcase you. Here's some of the other defensive linemen that we've gotten to the league that have less physical ability than you. The big thing here is, but the first place I go to is Julius Peppers. And you have to remember, Julius Peppers was like 6'7" and an absolute freak. So it's probably not fair. But in my head, that's the first place I went, was Julius Peppers, man. He was a basketball player that converted to football. How great would that be to have our own Julius Peppers? But either way, super excited. Really want this to happen. Hopefully we'll find out sometime soon where he's going to go, and that the place he's going is Auburn.
Yeah, usually when you hear the like basketball transitioning to the football, it's tight end. Yeah, I kind of like the idea of him being a pass rusher. So let's just dream for a second.
Okay.
You okay if we just dream for a moment?
Love dreaming.
This is a very realistic defensive line setup for Auburn entering 2024. Because I think Auburn's going to get both the guys we talked about today. Put myself out there. I think they get them both.
Okay.
At Buck, you could have Jalen McLeod, Kieron Crawford, and then the freshman of Amaris Williams and Jamonte Wallet.
It's not bad.
You take it. You take that.
You take that.
A defensive tackle, in no particular order, you could have Jason Jones,
For another show.
Isaiah Rakes, Trill Carter. At the 3 technique, in no particular order, Philip Blidi, Gage Keys, Malik Blockton.
Gosh.
Bobby Travis is in there somewhere. Deron Reed is in there somewhere. And then at strong side, defensive end, the 5 technique, you could have Keldrick Falk and then TJ Lindsay. And I think you could potentially scoot some of those 3 techniques out to the 5 if you needed to. And it's like, okay, all of a sudden you leave spring being a little concerned about the depth of the defensive line. And all of a sudden it's like, you know what? Like, they've got to execute. But on paper, I feel like you've done everything you can do up to that point.
Maybe this is me playing too much of the video games, but I keep thinking about like the different packages you could run. You could run a beef package where you have Rakes and Jones side by side at the same time. You know, Blidi's at one of your defensive end spots, Falk's at the other. You could run a speed package where you've got, Crawford out there. Just like all these different configurations of this.
The one I love is you scoot in like a 3rd and long situation. You scoot Keldrick into a 3 technique.
Yeah.
And then you've got Jalen McLeod and Kieron Crawford on the edges. Like, that would just be
absurd. That would be absurd.
Be
and
awesome.
it's just like, here's your, what is it? The New York Giants, I think, called that the 4 aces package when they played your New England Patriots in the Super Bowl.
Wow, we're doing this right now.
What happened? Okay. I don't. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Come on. No, I hound you for 28 to 3 all the time. So, I guess it's fair. But yeah, I mean, and we're dreaming. They've got to land these guys. They've got to, close the deal. But I think it's very realistic. That's what Auburn's defensive depth chart looks like up front entering the season. So we'll see. A lot can change. It is portal season. So portal season, no position gets more attention than quarterback. And it seems like Auburn's trying to get involved. We'll discuss that in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and it's playoff time in the NBA, in the NHL, apparently. And also baseball is in full swing. Your Braves are playing hot right now, and you need to get in on the action over at FanDuel because it's your place to bet on every single game. Also, nobody asked, I'm high on the Boston Celtics right now. Jason Tatum, just like the most casual triple-double ever over the weekend. So right now, new customers, they get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks. on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Lindsay, Crosby, our final few minutes of today's show. So a little bit of drama over the weekend. Jalen Rashada, who was committed at Florida, signed his NLI. They didn't give him the NIL that they wanted, so they released him. He goes to Arizona State. Doesn't play enough to count for a full year. I think he played in 3 games at Arizona State.
Yep.
And enters the portal. And so now, apparently, he's visiting Georgia on April 30th and May 1st. This is according to Hayes Fawcett of On3. And in this report, in this tweet, he then says, Auburn and Mississippi State are also schools to potentially get visits. Rashada has heard from 20-plus schools since entering the portal. None of that is shocking, I guess. He was kind of rumored to Georgia before he even entered the portal. But for Auburn to reach out and to fight for a visit, which is what this sounds like to me, says, hey, we're not totally closing the door on a quarterback. Which do I think Rashada will be an Auburn Tiger? No, I don't. But this tells me that if the right guy enters the portal, Hugh Freeze is going to pick up the phone and call him. And I don't think Rashada would come anywhere close. I don't think he's going to come in and beat Thorne for the job in 24. But this tells me, Lindsay, and please tell me if you think I'm wrong, but they're not 100% in on the future of quarterback after Peyton Thorne if they're making calls like this.
Well, if you think about what we've discussed before about Holden Garner, hasn't really been able to do a lot here at Auburn, hasn't seen the field a lot, hasn't really got himself into the conversation in practices and things like that. There's an expectation amongst a lot of people, and this is all speculation on my part, there's a lot of expectations that he eventually enters the portal and leaves. And so you've got Hank Brown, you've got Walker White, and you have Peyton Thorne, who is here for one more year and has to leave. I understand the value of bringing in another option. I think, if anything, this shows that Auburn is more serious about NIL than maybe a lot of people think. Because if you think about what happened with Jalen Rashada, that whole situation where he committed to Florida, they supposedly reneged on the NIL deal, wanted to lower the amounts and all of that. He tried to get out of the letter, got out of the letter, went to Arizona State instead. That's the last person that you're going to do poorly with when it comes to NIL, right? You obviously have to get that right. And the fact that Auburn's willing to reach out to an Elite 11 signal caller like that shows that this team has more NIL funds, I think, than we realized, and that they are comfortable spending them if they need to. Because if you don't think you have the money for a guy like that, you don't even make that call, right?
Well, and also Rashada wouldn't tell Hayes, or whoever's in Rashada's camp wouldn't tell Hayes Fawcett that Auburn and Mississippi State may get visits if that wasn't already discussed, or they didn't think that they could kind of come up to terms with what they would want to see.
Right.
Because Rashada also has to look at the roster and say, hey, they've got a returning starter. Like Peyton Thorne's clearly the guy going into 24. And so it's got to be more than that. He's got to be able to see a future there.
Yeah.
But, Hayes saying over 20 schools entered and 3 came up. 3 came up in the initial
and Auburn
report.
Was one of those 3?
Right. And once again, do I think he ends up at Auburn? No, not right now. I think things would have to change. I think he's going to go to Georgia. But to me, it was interesting because it just shows that the staff is fighting for that, or at least trying to put themselves in a position for that to kind of say, okay, who is the quarterback after Peyton Thorne's time at Auburn is done, which will be after the season. Oh, it's kind of an interesting thing. One other thing, and we'll wrap up the show with this. Should have put it. I couldn't figure out where to put this in the show, so we're just going to end it with Jay Fair entering the transfer portal. He was a name that we kind of threw out going into this transfer portal window. I think Jay Fair had a really solid season a year ago in an offense that really limited pretty much every skill position except for running backs. Mm-hmm. But I think this is just a sign of Auburn's receiver room is getting better and it's deeper, especially at that slot position where Jay Fair was. It also sounds like Jay wasn't fully available throughout all of spring. I think he was kind of battling an injury. And so you look at the emergence of Robert Lewis and Sam Jackson, the two transfer receivers that they brought in. And then Bryce Kane is a guy that a lot of people are super excited for. So, and, we'll see what happens with Caleb Burton and some of these other guys. But all in all, Jay Fair leaving. I think Jay Fair is going to be a sought-after receiver in the portal. Just when you look at all the receiver named, I think he's probably top 10 of all the receivers in the portal. But he could be a guy that could benefit from a fresh start.
31 catches, 324 yards, couple touchdowns. He's a guy that if he could find a way to get his yardage at Auburn, in that offense we had last year, you have to feel good about his ability to integrate into a more established offense with a more established play caller, quarterback, things like that. I can see a lot of teams reaching out, wanting him, especially somebody who's already gone through the SEC gauntlet for a season. You have tape of him, technically 2 years of tape on him, although he didn't play much in 22. I think he got like 2 catches all year.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you have multiple years of him on tape in the SEC to see what he can do. So
right.
It makes sense. You hate to lose a guy with experience, but like you said, a lot of pieces coming in that you're excited about. And when the room is better, there's less room for the guys who were already there, who were partly the reason why the room wasn't better. So I get it. Wish Jay Fair nothing but the best.
100%. Yeah, sounds like he was a great teammate, a great leader, a great student, and hopefully he succeeds wherever he goes, unless he pulls an Aiden and goes to Bama, which I don't think will happen.
And if he does, maybe he can just do it and keep his mouth shut. I think that's the big thing. Just do it and just shut up about it,
Oh, my goodness. All right.
He had every chance to earn the play time and to show his ability, and he didn't do it.
No.
It's not Bruce Pearl's fault. Bruce Pearl gave him
then after
every
the season, he just
world.
ghosts the coaching staff. It's like, okay, all right. All
right, buddy.
You're choosing to do it this way. Whatever.
Yeah, this was you, not us. Whatever.
Yeah, whatever. Lindsay, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. It's the hub for everything. The Atlanta Braves coverage, bravestoday.com. We've got Miami Marlins coverage, marlinstoday.com. We've got Auburn Tigers coverage, auburndaily.com. All of those sites, find me.
Yep, he's everywhere. Please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.